Video game consoles, they're hard to sell, and Nintendo is no stranger to not knowing how to sell things. Just take a look at the Virtual Boy. That thing is just barely above the state of Wyoming.
So, let's talk about Nintendo's failures. The first big failure Nintendo had was the Virtual Boy. It was virtual reality in 1995. What can go wrong? Well, let me tell you. This console used 3D technology, which was brought to Nintendo by reflection technology. The company first actually pitched this to Sega, but they turned them down. And you know why? Because the visuals would only be red and black, and they're afraid that it would cause motion sickness or eye strain. On the other hand, Nintendo was all over this tech. So they started developing what they called at the time VR32, as it was virtual reality and had 32 bits. Since this console was being developed alongside the Nintendo 64, it was drastically downscaled, to the point where the device was pretty much unfinished, and really could have used more testing. But it came out and it sold 700,000 units and was discontinued after only a year on the market. Was its games good at least? Let me see which ones I can name. Mario's Tennis, that one Mario game, Red Alert. Yeah, this system was pretty much worthless. Like, for one, the games look weird because the aforementioned red and black graphics, which, I mean, Nintendo's not a stranger to having graphics on consoles that are just a couple colors, for example, the original Game Boy, but that wasn't literally in your face like the Virtual Boy is. Second, what the heck does virtual reality add to these games? Like, basically nothing. Some games have 3D effects, but besides that, this isn't really virtual reality how we know it today. A head strap was planned, but it never happened. And yeah, this console was just not meant to be released at this point in time. It's clear that neither Nintendo nor the industry at large was ready for virtual reality in the 90s. It really only got its footing around the 2010s. And Nintendo would go on to play with 3D mode graphics more. And I'm not talking traditional 3D, I'm talking 3D movie type of 3D. It was tested with the GameCube, with Luigi's Mansion, and finally in 2011, we got the 3DS, which used 3D similar to the Virtual Boy. And like the Virtual Boy, 3D was kinda useless here too. But at least the 3DS was actually good, unlike this red eye hazard. Next, the N64DD. It's an add-on disk drive attachment to the N64. One of the biggest complaints from developers about the original N64 was using cartridges instead of discs. You see, discs could hold more memory and generally give developers more freedom with the hardware. This is why the PlayStation got so much third-party support, while the N64 had cartridges that could store far less memory, but had better loading times, but that wasn't enough of a selling point to get developers on board. So the console relied mostly on Nintendo support most of the time, and there were numerous drops of support throughout its lifetime. If Nintendo didn't have their exclusives, it's clear they'd be dead by now. But Nintendo felt that they should combat this complaint in some way, so the concept of a disk drive add-on was born. It used floppy disks, not quite the same thing, but sure, yeah, okay. They can store more data, I guess. How did they screw it up?
They only released it in Japan.
So because of its Japan exclusivity, it had very little support. It was a flop at 15,000 units sold. And the Mario Artist games were sort of cool, almost like soft sequels to Mario Paint. There was also Doshin the Giant. Yeah, but that's kind of it though. Dude, so many games were announced to this thing. Over 60 games were planned, in fact. But the actual amount that made it on the thing was merely a fraction of that. This was just a victim of poor marketing and too late in the lifespan of the console. And yet Nintendo had started to slip in sales with the GameCube and later on the Wii U, but at least those had gone into tens of millions. Now this is technically another Nintendo failure, but it's more so partly their failure because they licensed their franchises out. The Philips CDI, very infamous console for a few reasons. It is more marketed as a multimedia device more than something that could play games. It was more marketed as something that could play movies, music, etc. Basically, what Nintendo contributed to the system was their franchises, which would not be developed by them or even overseen by them. So we already knew that was a recipe for disaster. And recipe for disaster it was, because the gameplay was just not very good, first off. For example, the Zelda CDI games and Mario Hotel were just not good. Secondly, the cutscenes and writing, honestly, I think I should just let them speak for themselves.
Nice of the princess to invite us over for a picnic, eh, Luigi? I hope she made lots of spaghetti. Gee, it's kinda dark. You bring a light? No. I hope we can get rid of him. Get the hint? No. It's been one of those days.
Gee, it sure is boring around here.
My boy, and I will make your face the greatest in Korodai, or else you will die. I wonder what's for dinner.
Oh boy!
Good.
And for that, how much do you think you had to pay just for those games? Just take a wild shot in the dark. You're probably wrong, it was $800. And adjusted for inflation since then, it's well over $1,300. What the heck? And in terms of design, it just kind of looks like a VCR, and the controller looks like some kind of bullcrap Atari would have come up with. So yeah, since then, Nintendo's probably had trust issues with their franchises, and Philips has, I don't know, been making razors. So now let's switch gears to a console that was, as a whole, pretty successful, but this version specifically didn't do all too well. The version in question, the Game Boy Micro, a version of the Game Boy Advance that was freaking small. So first off, the elephant in the room. This released so close to DS, because the DS would absolutely foreshadow this tiny little guy in every single way possible. I don't know if this dissuaded anyone from buying it, but this lacked backwards compatibility with the original Game Boy and Game Boy Color games, so you were limited to the Advance library, which isn't too bad. I mean, the amount of games released for the Advance is certainly very big, but it used to be even bigger with previous models of the Advance. And thirdly, marketing was almost not present, and the marketing there was... Okay, let me just try to describe it without getting the boot from YouTube. So, this one ad has a mouse in a maze and a Game Boy Micro, and when the mouse gets to the Game Boy Micro, it decides to, yeah, I can't show that. What Nintendo employee looked at this device and went,
See that device right there? It really looks like something a mouse would want to bang. I really need therapy.
this is honestly so weird to see from Nintendo. Like what was the thought process behind this? Like, how would this sell the Game Boy Micro? So yeah, it sold poorly compared to the SP and original Game Boy Advance, and it failed to meet Nintendo's expectations. I kind of think this was also used as a backup plan if the DS failed, so they could just bank on this if it did. And finally, the Wii U. This console failed for a few reasons, and all these reasons have been repeated over and over for numerous times by several different people for the past few years. First off, the marketing was just awful. Most people wondered if this thing was even a new console. Well, we all know that it is. But the general public may have been led to think otherwise, because many of the Wii's games and add-ons followed a Wii blank format. So people just thought, oh, this is some kind of tablet add-on to the Wii. Also, the commercials, oh my god, the commercials. Oh, most of them featured kids trying to pitch the Wii U to their parents. And they were just kind of the pure definition of cringe. So because of that, I don't think the hardcore audience would want to come back, because it's pandering to kids.
Yeah, look like I've been upgraded.
I heard that. Don't hit me. Wow, that was a cheap shot.
Whoshi. It's a double Yoshi explosion.
Hot buttered popcorn, that's a deal. Yeah. Hot buttered popcorn.
And Nintendo suffered during this generation financially. Not enough to bankrupt them. They were obviously much more well off financially than they were back in the 1970s and before. But 2013, also known as the year of Luigi, was their worst financial year in some time. So yeah, at least the 3DS was there to kind of remedy the lack of success the Wii U had. And even then, the 3DS didn't even near replicate the success of the DS. But it did enough to at least somewhat keep Nintendo kind of relevant.
Hot buttered popcorn.
Okay. So that's basically all of Nintendo's failed consoles. I don't really know how to end this video. Can you give me some ideas?
Just add some random green screen effect in post, I don't know.
You know what? Yeah, I don't have any other ideas.
Hot buttered popcorn.
Yoshi explosion.